So there is a preset for a volcano in terrain and volcano, and that's perfectly fine to use that. But for this tutorial, I'll show you a different way you can create a volcano. It will introduce you to some other features of Gaia, and apart from creating volcanoes, you could use this approach for creating a mountain or anything of that type of shape. So to start with, let's jump in and click on primitive, and let's go to cone and add that. As you can see, that adds a cone shape, and I'm just going to reduce the scale just so it doesn't take up the entire landscape area, so it sits a bit more in the middle. So I'll take the scale down to about 0.59, something like that is fine. So for a moment, I'm just going to bring on a reference image of a volcano. And obviously, like, volcanoes don't have pointy tops, they do have some degree of opening. And this is a fairly large opening, so I'm just going to take this off screen. So what we want to do is just click this top. And to do that, we can go into, with this node still selected, go into the right bottom hand side in the modifier stack, and we can add something called a clip. And then just hover over where it says 1, and then just holding the left mouse button, drag it down, and then we can clip the top. And I'll drag it down to something like this, and that should be fine. Of course, we can always come back and edit these things later on if we need to. So now I'm just going to right click under the cone node and search for mountain. And I'm going to add a mountain. Now, the reason I'm adding a mountain is because the volcano is in its mouth. It has a hollowed out area, and we can use a mountain and subtract it from the cone shape for this area. So I'm going to make this mountain higher. So in its details, properties, increase the height. It's 2.3, something like that. The scale, I'm actually going to reduce so it doesn't cover such a large area. Something like 0.15 should be fine. Now this is like too low, too little. So let's go back to our modifier stack and let's do an auto level. Actually, that is that button there. But now let's add a shaper as well. And with a shaper, we can make it thinner or wider. So for the shaper, for now, something like 0.2. And finally, I'm just going to add a clamp. And the reason I'm adding the clamp is just so I can bring down the height a bit. So add the clamp, hover over where it says 1, and then just drag it down to the left. Something like that is looking good. We can go back into the shaper. We can make it a bit wider by increasing it. And again, we can always come back and update this if we need to, but that's looking pretty good to proceed. So from the cone node, I'm going to drag off and just drop that onto the out of mountain. And now in the combine node, I'm going to select subtract. And as you can see, we've got this mouth opening that's got a hollowed out area. So next, let's add some erosion. So drag off from the combine node and search for E2 we can search for, which is erosion 2, and add that erosion. Now you can play around with these values to get the type of shape that you're looking for, the erosion that you're looking for. I'm not going to change them too much. I might just increase the duration a little bit and maybe reduce the down cutting. Looking good. Now the area around the volcano is looking way too flat. So beneath erosion, let's right click and let's search for another landscape node. We'll use rugged. And with the rugged node, we just want this to be fairly flat. So we can select in its properties, style can be B, and then scale, we can reduce it a little bit, and that looks good. So now I'm going to drag off of erosion and plug that into the out socket of rugged. So in the combine node, we can select add. We could probably leave the ratio where it is. Perhaps we could scroll it to the right a bit. I mean, if you scroll it down to 0, it gets rid of the rugged landscape completely. So let's perhaps go up to about 0.6. And the final thing we're going to do is just drag off of this combine node and search for thermal. And we can use thermal too. And this is basically, it adds thermal effects. So with that thermal selected, we can increase the duration, be a bit too much. And what we're getting is the lava or the dried lava from previous volcano eruptions. Now, if you want to edit the shape of the volcano, we can select thermal, press F, and that forces the view on thermal. So what other node, if we press any other node, it'll still have that final node view. Let's go back to mountain, and then with the clamp, we can change the values. If I do it too low, we start to lose that hollowed out area. Play around with the shaper as well. Good. We can go back to the cone node, change the value in the clip. It's nice. We've got this kind of deep gully here, and I'll just tidy up the nodes there a little bit. The final thing we need to do is just select thermal 2, press F to unforce the view. If we right click on thermal and go to show locked 2D viewport, and then in this new panel, if you click on the button at the top right hand side, we can look at the different maps. So we've got where and deposits. So it's probably very difficult to see, but there's a map for some of the deposits. Oh, sorry, there's a map for the deposits there. I'm just going to turn that off. So what I want to do is just isolate the deposit area so I can apply a specific texture or color to that area. And if I drag off from deposits, like so, to search for adjust, and then click on adjust. And now with adjust, if I click on auto level, you can clearly see the deposits there. And then you can use multiply, increase the value just to bring out the strength. Multiply, I'll have it about 3.8 for now. That looks good. Okay, so let's click back on thermal. So that's actually done now. Let's just have a look at this in 4K before we proceed to texturing. It will take a while just to update the nodes. So the preview resolution is now updated to 4K. It has changed the structure somewhat, but I'm happy with that. I'm happy to proceed. Of course, if you wanted to change the shape of what you're doing for the volcano, then you could go back to mountain or cone and proceed to update the shape even further. Saying that, one thing I might do is just click on the combine node. That's the one that combines cone and mountain. And in its details in ratio, I might just increase that just so we get more of this hollowed out area in the mouth. And then I'm just going to click on thermal. I'm doing this in 4K, so it's going to take longer to update. And that's looking a bit better. Okay, now I'm going to go back to 2K because working in 4K can just be too slow, constantly updating the nodes. And now let's proceed to the texturing. So to start with, I'm going to click on thermal 2. I'm going to press P. And where it says connect to portal and out, I'm just going to add a portal there. Also, I'm going to select the adjust node and I'm going to press F2 first, or you can right click on it to rename it. And then I'm going to call this deposit mask. And now I'm going to, with it selected, press P and select the out option. And that connects a portal to the out option. Now that we've done that, just beneath thermal, I'm going to right click and search for texture base. And for this to work, we need to connect the the thermal portal to it. So the texture base is where we can connect our textures and our colors and our set maps. But for this to work, it needs information about the landscape. So with that texture base selected, I'm going to press P, connect to portal. I'm going to select the in option, and I'm going to select thermal 2. So thermal 2 is the last node in the sequence of nodes that we have added. And by connecting it to the texture base with the portal, so a portal basically works as a connector, and by selecting it in the texture base, it gives the texture base all the information it needs around the landscape. So now we can drag out of out, and we can select sat map. It's there by default. And the first thing we'll do is we will add a set map for the rock. So I'm going to go to rock. I'm just looking for a gray color or grayish. That looks good. 337. So that's the rock category. And the color palette is 337. I've selected there. Now I'm going to drag out from the texture base again. I'm going to select set map. Now this time I want some green foliage-like color for the ground area. For that, I'm going to select green. So I'm going to go into its properties, select green, and select one of these green color palettes. I think 029 will work for that. Looks good. Now I'm going to drag out of the first set map, drop that into the out socket of the second. I'm going to select the combine. Now, this is blended together, but what I want is a way just to have the rock showing on the volcano. To do that, we can use a slope mask. So from the combine node, there's a little socket at the bottom, which is its mask socket. Just drag off of that and search for slope. And this basically creates a mask by angle. So any angle over a certain point, or any angle over a certain range, I should say, will have the rock mask applied. Now the angle to work, it needs information about the landscape. So we'll plug in the portal again. So make sure slope is selected, press P in the in socket, click on that, and then select thermal 2. And we've got our mask here now. If I select the combine node again, you can see that the black area, the darker areas are where the rock is showing through. What we can do, because we're using a mask, we can take the blend and the ratio. We can drag it right up to 1. That may be a bit strong. We've got this nice area at the top where we've got some vegetation growing, as this is a dormant volcano. That looks good. Perhaps for this, we can drag down the blend a little bit. Maybe 0.7. Looks good. It just kind of tones it down a bit. So now let's create a sat map specifically for the thermal deposits, or where the lava basically has dried. So drag out from the texture base again, let go, select sat map. And because this is dried up lava, let's select maybe a darker green, because there will be some form of organic life, vegetation that has grown on it. So I can go into green. To start with, I'm going to just select 000, so the first color palette. We can always change this later on. Now the first combine node for the two sat maps, let's drag off from that and place it on the out socket of the sat map. And now with that second combine node selected, press P, and where it says mask, select mask, and this is where we add the deposit mask, like so. And now we've got this sat map only showing in the deposit mask. So I'm just looking at some different variations of the color for the sediment. I think 297 actually looks better. Now to finish off here, we've got a very hard edge. I mean, there may be something in some scenarios that you would be looking for. If I actually go around the other side, there's more of a blend here. In this case, this isn't what I'm looking for. So that's between the volcano, the thermal deposits, and the landscape. There are different ways that we can fix that. In this case, the simplest is going to be, I'm just going to make sure that final node is forced. So click on it and press F to force it. If we just go back to where we've got our mountain and cone nodes combining, click on that. This is our subtract. And we've got it clamped. If we click on extend, let it update. And then it gives us a more gradient blend. Basically, how this works is that an extend is better for blending textures more naturally and avoiding hard edges. Whereas clamp, it kind of does as it says. It basically clamps the pixels or the texture to a certain area. So that pretty much fixes it. I might just make it a little brighter. So let's go right hand side. We've got this icon, this kind of sun icon. I'm just going to make sure I've got the final combine node selected. I'm going to press on this sun icon, exposure, bring it up a little bit, maybe change the direction of the sun. And finally, I'll just change it to 4K. Now that I've changed to 4K, it has changed elements of the blending and some of the details. And we have got back some of that hard edge, but I actually don't mind that. It's not quite like it was before, and the hard edge is a bit wider and it looks a bit more blended. So yeah, that's looking good. We've got green foliage growing at the top, rock at the sides, and then foliage down at the lower areas as well. But that covers it. If you've got any questions or comments, please do leave them in the comment section.